Have you thought about what I said? Nathan asked, his voice carefully measured as he swirled the amber liquid in his crystal tumbler. The question hung in our penthouse living room like a storm cloud, heavy with unspoken accusations. I rested, my hand on my swollen belly, feeling our daughter kick beneath my palm. 6 months pregnant, and my husband of 4 years was asking for a divorce. The irony wasn't lost on me. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I've thought about little else, Nathan, I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the hurricane of emotions inside me. From my position on our imported Italian leather sofa, the one Nathan had insisted we needed, I watched him pace before the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan's glittering skyline. Then you understand my position, he continued, not meeting my eyes. This isn't working anymore, Elise. We've grown apart. These things happen. These things happen. As if dissolving a marriage while your wife carries your child was as casual as canceling dinner reservations. Behind Nathan, the city pulsed with evening energy, thousands of lights flickering like stars brought down to earth. I'd once found that view mesmerizing. Now it just reminded me of Nathan's ambition. Cold, distant, beautiful from afar but empty up close. And the timing? I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. You couldn't wait until after our daughter is born? Nathan sighed dramatically, the sound I'd come to recognize as his prelude to condescension. The timing is unfortunate, I admit, but dragging this out won't make it easier. He finally turned to face me, his expression a practiced mask of regret. My lawyer says a clean break is best. Ah, yes, his lawyer. Miranda Chen, the sleek, sharply dressed divorce attorney who'd been calling our home for weeks. The same Miranda who'd been texting Nathan at all hours. The same Miranda whose perfume I'd detected on his suit jacket last month. I took a slow, centering breath. And what does Miranda suggest about custody arrangements? The subtle flinch confirmed my suspicions, before he could compose himself. I don't know what you're implying, but Miranda is merely providing professional services. Professional services. Is that what they called it now? Of course, I replied, the picture of calm acceptance. And these professional services, do they include a parenting plan for our daughter, or is that an additional fee? Nathan's jaw tightened. Don't be difficult, Elise. I've already been more than generous in my initial offer. He set his tumbler down with a sharp clink against our marble coffee table. The penthouse will be sold, assets divided equally. You'll receive appropriate child support naturally. Appropriate, generous. His careful language spoke volumes about what he wasn't saying, that he planned to give me the bare minimum he could get away with. I wondered if he remembered that day 4 years ago, standing in pristine white at the altar, vowing forever before our friends and family. I wondered if he remembered the tears in his eyes when I told him I was pregnant. I wondered when those things had become inconvenient obstacles to his happiness rather than his happiness itself. See? I said, rising slowly from the couch, one hand supporting my lower back. Pregnancy had made such simple movements increasingly difficult. And when should I expect formal papers? Miranda is preparing everything, Nathan replied, relief evident in his voice. He'd expected hysterics, perhaps, or begging. They should be ready by the end of the week. I nodded and moved toward our bedroom, soon to be just his bedroom, I supposed. Elise? He called after me, an unusual hesitation in his voice. I hope we can keep this civil, for everyone's sake. I paused in the doorway, not turning around. Civil is my middle name, Nathan. What Nathan didn't know, what he had never bothered to discover in our years together, was that civility was indeed my specialty. As the overlooked middle daughter of Richard Harrington, I'd learned early that quiet observation revealed more than brash confrontation. While my sisters fought for our father's attention, I'd watched and learned how he built his real estate empire from nothing. Inside our bedroom, I closed the door softly behind me. No dramatics, no slamming. Nathan would interpret my calm as defeat, as acceptance. Men like him always mistook composure for weakness. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. "Everything okay, Lise? Annual review meeting tomorrow at 10. Are you still coming?" I smiled faintly at the screen. At 72, Dad still ran the tightest ship in New York real estate. Even with his semi-retirement, he kept tabs on every aspect of Harrington Holdings. "I'll be there," I texted back. "And Dad, I'll need some time with you afterward. Private matter." His response came immediately. "My door's always open for you, kiddo." Setting my phone aside, I moved to the walk-in closet and slid aside the false panel in the back wall, a security feature Nathan had never questioned when we renovated last year. Inside the small safe was a slim leather portfolio. I extracted it and returned to sit on the edge of our king-sized bed. The portfolio contained a single document, bound with a simple black clip. I ran my fingers over the embossed logo in the I corner, Pearson Mahoney, Attorneys at Law. 4 years ago, 2 weeks before our wedding, I'd sat in Thomas Pierce's office on my father's recommendation. "A prenuptial agreement is simply prudent business, Ms. Harrington," the elder lawyer had explained, "especially given your family's holdings." "Nathan would see it as a sign of distrust," I'd replied. "He's made it clear he finds prenups insulting." Thomas had leaned forward, his eyes kind but serious behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Then perhaps we should discuss an alternative arrangement, something that provides protection without the confrontation." That alternative lay in my hands now, a post-nuptial agreement, prepared but never presented to Nathan, with a unique provision that would activate automatically under specific circumstances. Nathan's signature was already on it, hidden within the stack of annual investment documents I had him sign each year for our joint portfolio management. The provision was simple. In the event that Nathan initiated divorce proceedings while I was pregnant or within 1 year of childbirth, a significant restructuring of our financial arrangements would trigger. Instead of the standard equal division he expected under New York law, he would retain only what he had brought into the marriage, a considerably smaller amount than what we now controlled together. My father had called it an integrity clause. Thomas Pierce had called it innovative but entirely enforceable. I had called it insurance I never expected to need. Yet here I was, 6 months pregnant, with divorce papers imminent. I returned the document to its hiding place and changed into my nightgown. Tomorrow would require careful timing and perfect composure. Fortunately, those were qualities I'd cultivated my entire life. As I settled into bed, I heard Nathan's phone ring in the living room, followed by his hushed voice. Miranda, no doubt, finalizing details of what he thought would be a straightforward dissolution of our marriage. I closed my eyes, feeling my daughter shift inside me. "Don't worry, little one," I whispered, stroking my belly. "Mommy has a plan." The Harrington Holdings headquarters occupied the top 10 floors of a sleek skyscraper in Midtown. I'd worked here every summer during college and for 2 years after graduation, before meeting Nathan at a charity gala and redirecting my attention to supporting his career at Reynolds Financial. As I stepped off the elevator onto the executive floor, familiar faces greeted me with warm smiles tinged with concern. My pregnancy was visible to everyone now, and news traveled fast in these circles. "Elise, you're positively glowing," said Janet, my father's executive assistant of 20 years. Her eyes, sharp with intelligence, assessed me quickly. "But you look tired. Is everything all right?" "Just pregnancy insomnia," I replied with a reassuring smile. "Is he ready for me?" "Go right in. The quarterly review team just wrapped up." Janet's gaze lingered on me, and I knew she suspected there was more to my visit than routine business. My father stood as I entered his corner office, coming around his massive desk to embrace me. Richard Harrington had the bearing of a man half his age his silver hair the only concession to time's passage. "There's my girl," he said warmly, helping me to one of the plush chairs positioned before his desk. "How's my granddaughter treating you?" "She's practicing her kickboxing skills on my bladder," I replied, settling into the chair. "But otherwise, we're managing." Dad returned to his seat, studying me with the same penetrating gaze that had intimidated countless business rivals. "Now, what's this private matter you mentioned? And where's Nathan? I expected him to accompany you to the doctor appointments by now." I took a deep breath. "Nathan asked for a divorce last night." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. My father's expression didn't change, but his knuckles whitened where they rested on his desk. "I see," he said finally, his voice deceptively soft. "And his reasoning for this impeccably timed decision?" "The usual clichés. Growing apart. Wanting. Different things." I kept my tone neutral, factual. "His lawyer is preparing papers as we speak." "Miranda Chen," Dad stated rather than asked. At my surprised look, he shrugged. "I make it my business to know who represents potential adversaries. She has a reputation for being ruthless, especially with prenuptial challenges." "That won't be an issue," I replied, allowing myself a small smile. "Since we don't have a prenup." My father's eyebrow arched. "I distinctly recall suggesting otherwise before your wedding." "You suggested I protect myself," I corrected him. And I did. Just not in the way Nathan would have expected. Understanding dawned on his face, followed by something that looked almost like pride. "The document Thomas Pierce prepared." I nodded. "Nathan signed it 3 years ago without realizing what it was. The pregnancy contingency will activate the moment he files." Dad leaned back in his chair, a hint of a smile playing around his mouth. "And he has no idea." "None," I confirmed. "He expects a standard divorce, equal division of assets, minimal child support, and a clean break with his reputation intact. But instead, he'll learn that while he was climbing the corporate ladder at Reynolds Financial, I was quietly investing my trust fund through Harrington subsidiaries. The penthouse he thinks we own jointly, purchased through my holding company. The vacation property in the Hamptons, same arrangement." My father nodded slowly. "And you need what from me exactly?" "2 things," I said, straightening in my chair. "First, I need access to the private investigator you used during the Westridge acquisition. Nathan believes his affair with Miranda is well hidden, but I need documentation. Not for the divorce. New York is no fault, but for afterward. And, second, I need to accelerate my return to Harrington Holdings. The vice presidency of strategic development has been vacant since Michael retired. I want it." Dad studied me for a long moment. When Nathan and I had married, I'd stepped back from my executive track at Harrington to support his career. It had seemed romantic at the time, the supportive wife behind the successful man. Now, the naivety of that decision stung like salt. "In an open wound, the board would need to approve the appointment," Dad said finally. "But as it happens, I'd already planned to propose your name at next month's meeting. Your work on the Richardson portfolio impressed everyone, even doing it part-time." Relief washed through me. The Richardson portfolio had been my pet project. For the past year, a series of carefully structured investments that had yielded returns well above market average. I'd managed it quietly without Nathan's knowledge or involvement, presenting my work directly to the board each quarter. "Michael's position is yours if you want it," Dad continued, "though the timing may raise eyebrows given your condition." I placed both hands on my belly. This baby is precisely why I need to secure my position now. Nathan doesn't expect me to fight back. He thinks pregnancy makes me vulnerable, that I'll accept whatever terms he offers just to avoid stress. Dad's expression darkened. "He never deserved you, Elise." "Perhaps not," I acknowledged. "But he gave me one good thing." I rubbed my belly gently. and she's worth all of this. My father reached across the desk and squeezed my hand. What's your timeline? Nathan's lawyer will serve papers by week's end. The postnuptial will activate immediately. I'll need the investigator's findings before our first court appearance, which Miranda will schedule as soon as possible. She prefers to overwhelm opponents with rapid proceedings. Consider it done. Dad made a brief note on his tablet. Janet, we'll connect you with Sullivan Investigations this afternoon. On the company matter, I'll call an emergency board session for tomorrow. Given your track record with the Richardson portfolio, I anticipate no objections to your appointment. I rose from my chair, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Thank you, Dad. No thanks needed, he replied, coming around to embrace me again. You're a Harrington, Elise. We take care of our own. He pulled back, his eyes fierce with protective love. And whatever that fool husband of yours has planned, he's about to learn what that really means. As I left my father's office, my phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. Meeting with Miranda running long. Don't wait up. We can discuss details. Tomorrow. I slipped the phone back into my purse without replying. Let him think I was at home, crying into my prenatal vitamins. By tomorrow, the landscape of our divorce would look dramatically different than anything he and Miranda had planned. The elevator down to the lobby, I pulled out my phone again and opened my banking app. With a few quick taps, I transferred a significant sum from our joint account into my private one. Nothing that could be construed as hiding assets, just enough to ensure comfort while the legal process unfolded. As I stepped out into the bright, spring sunshine, I felt my daughter kick decisively, as if offering her own vote of confidence. That's right, little one, I murmured, hailing a taxi. We're done being underestimated. The following day passed in a blur of activity. While Nathan remained conspicuously absent, staying at Miranda's apartment, though he didn't know I was aware of that detail, I met with Sullivan Investigations, finalized my appointment to Harrington, Holdings' executive team, and prepared for the inevitable confrontation. By evening, I had settled comfortably in the penthouse living room with a cup of herbal tea when I heard Nathan's key in the door. Game time. He entered looking rumpled and tired, his designer suit slightly creased. The sight of me calmly reading on the sofa seemed to throw him momentarily. Elise, he said, quickly recovering his composure. I didn't expect you to be up. Waiting for my husband to come home seems reasonable, I replied mildly, setting my book aside. Especially when we have important matters to discuss. Nathan loosened his tie, avoiding my gaze. About that, Miranda has prepared the initial filing. She suggests we meet together tomorrow to review terms before submitting to the court, for simplicity's sake. Simplicity, I echoed. Yes, that would be preferable. Something in my tone made him glance up sharply. You seem calm. Did you expect histrionics? Begging? Tearful appeals to our vows? I sipped my tea. That's not my style, Nathan. You know that. Relief flickered across his face. Then you understand this is for the best. A clean break, fair division, and we can both move forward. I understand perfectly, I assured him. Though I should mention I've engaged my own counsel to review the papers. Standard procedure. I'm sure Miranda would agree. Nathan's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. That's unnecessary. The terms are extremely generous. Nevertheless, I replied, rising from the sofa with deliberate grace, one hand supporting my belly. Thomas Pierce will be joining us at tomorrow's meeting. Pierce? Nathan's voice rose slightly. From your father's firm? Elise, this doesn't need to become contentious. I paused on my way to the bedroom. Nothing contentious about proper legal representation, Nathan. I thought you of all people would appreciate due diligence. I offered him a serene smile. Miranda's office at 2, correct? We'll be there. Before he could respond, I closed the bedroom door behind me, leaving him standing in the living room, the first seedlings of doubt visibly taking root. In our bedroom, soon to be just mine, I changed into my nightgown and settled onto the bed with my laptop. A new email from Sullivan Investigations contained preliminary findings. Date-stamped photos of Nathan entering Miranda's building late at night, receipts from romantic dinners charged to his corporate card, and hotel reservations made under his assistant's name but signed for by him. A thorough documentation of betrayal, all compiled in less than 24 hours. My father's resources were nothing if not efficient. Another email notification appeared, this one from the board secretary, confirming my appointment as Vice President of Strategic Development at Harrington Holdings, effective immediately. Attached was a press release scheduled for distribution tomorrow afternoon. Perfect timing. I closed my laptop and turned off the light, listening to Nathan moving around in the guest bedroom down the hall. Tomorrow, Miranda Chen would expect to face a distraught pregnant woman desperate to preserve her marriage. Instead, she would meet the newly appointed VP of one of New York's most powerful real estate conglomerates, backed by Thomas Pierce, whose reputation for ruthless efficiency rivaled Miranda's own. And Nathan would discover that underestimating Elise Harrington had been the most expensive mistake of his life. As I drifted toward sleep, my daughter kicked energetically, as if sensing the coming storm. "That's right," I whispered into the darkness. "Tomorrow, we show them what we're made of." Miranda Chen's law office occupied the 42nd floor of a gleaming tower in the financial district, its reception area decorated in shades of steel, gray and Arctic white. Intentionally intimidating, I thought, as the receptionist led me past glass-walled conference rooms toward the corner office. I'd arrived precisely 15 minutes early. Not enough to seem anxious, but sufficient to settle. Myself before Nathan and Miranda began their performance. Thomas Pierce walked beside me, his silver hair and impeccable charcoal suit projecting exactly the gravitas I needed. "Remember," Thomas murmured as we approached Miranda's office, "let them present their terms completely before we introduce the post-nuptial. Maximum effect." I nodded, adjusting the tailored maternity blazer I'd selected for today. Harrington navy blue, structured shoulders, subtle gold buttons bearing my family's crest. Battle armor in its way. Miranda's assistant opened the door with a practiced smile. "Ms. Chen is ready for you. Mr. Morrison hasn't arrived yet." Of course not. Nathan's preferred power move, letting others wait. Miranda rose from behind her glass desk as we entered, her crimson sheath dress a stark contrast to the monochromatic office. Her smile remained fixed as she registered Thomas's presence. "Miss Harrington," she greeted me, extending her hand. "And Mr. Pierce. I wasn't aware you'd be joining us. Last-minute addition," Thomas replied smoothly, his handshake firm. Ms. Harrington felt proper representation was prudent. Miranda's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course, though this is really just a preliminary discussion of terms. Nothing formal yet." "Even preliminary terms benefit from professional review," I said, lowering myself carefully into one of the sleek chairs before her desk. At 6 months pregnant, such simple movements required increasing concentration. Miranda resumed her seat, dark eyes assessing me with newfound caution. Nathan had undoubtedly described me as compliant, perhaps even naive. Thomas Pierce's presence had already disrupted that narrative. "Nathan mentioned you're expecting a girl," Miranda said, her tone softening into practiced sympathy. "Congratulations. These circumstances must be especially difficult." "Thank you for your concern," I replied, matching her professional courtesy, though I've found that difficulty often reveals opportunity. Before she could respond, the door opened again, and Nathan strode in. He faltered slightly upon seeing me already seated with Thomas, then quickly recovered, straightening his tie. "Sorry. I'm late. Board meeting ran long." His standard excuse, delivered with practiced casualness. "Thomas, good to see you." Thomas nodded without rising. "Nathan." Miranda gestured Nathan to the seat beside her, creating a visual alignment I was certain was intentional. Us versus them. The battle lines drawn. Shall we begin? Miranda opened a sleek leather portfolio. I've prepared a standard dissolution agreement based on Nathan's instructions. Equal division of marital assets, joint custody with primary physical, custody to Elise until the child is 3, at which point we'd revisit the arrangement. Child support calculated per state guidelines. She slid a document across to me. The financial disclosure lists all known assets. Nathan has been very forthcoming. I accepted the paperwork without looking at it, passing it directly to Thomas. His eyes flickered over the first page, then the second. A slight twitch in his jaw the only indication of his reaction. And the penthouse? Thomas asked, his tone deceptively mild. To be sold, Miranda replied immediately. Proceeds divided equally, of course. Nathan understands Elise will need to secure appropriate housing for herself and the baby. Generous, Thomas murmured, continuing to scan the document. Nathan shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable with Thomas's presence. Good. Discomfort led to mistakes. As you can see, Miranda continued, we're proposing a very fair settlement. Nathan values an amicable resolution. I smiled politely. Amicable is certainly preferable. Nathan relaxed slightly, interpreting my calm as acquiescence. Miranda, more perceptive, studied me with narrowed eyes. Before we proceed further, Thomas interjected, setting aside Miranda's document, we should address the existing agreement. Nathan frowned. What existing agreement? Thomas withdrew a slim folder from his briefcase and placed it on the desk. The postnuptial agreement executed by both parties 3 years ago. The color drained from Nathan's face. That's impossible. We never signed a postnup. On the contrary. Thomas opened the folder and turned it toward them. Your signature appears on page 12, dated October 15th, 3 years ago, and again on the annual renewal, each subsequent year. Miranda snatched the document, scanning it rapidly, her professional composure cracking. This is irregular. When was this supposedly presented to my client? It was included in the annual investment portfolio documentation, I explained, watching Nathan's growing confusion. The same packet you sign every year without reading, Nathan. Page 12, right after the Westbrook Fund disclosures. Recognition dawned in his eyes, followed quickly by anger. That's entrapment. You buried it intentionally. It was clearly marked, Thomas countered calmly, and executed with proper notarization. The courts have repeatedly upheld similar agreements, provided they meet basic standards of disclosure, which this does. Miranda was scanning the document, furiously now, flipping pages with increasing agitation. When she reached a particular section, she stopped abruptly, her expression hardening. This contains a pregnancy contingency clause, she said, voice tight with controlled rage. Indeed, Thomas confirmed. Activated specifically under the current circumstances, initiation of divorce proceedings during pregnancy. Nathan grabbed the document from Miranda. What the hell does that mean? What contingency? It means, I said, speaking directly to him for the first time, that in the event you chose to divorce me while I was carrying your child, certain financial protections activate automatically. Protections, Miranda repeated flatly. Let's be specific, shall we? This clause essentially reverts all marital assets to their original owner, minus specific contributions to joint ventures. She looked up, eyes cold. It's punitive. It's insurance, I corrected her, against exactly this scenario. Nathan was still reading, his face growing increasingly pale. This can't be enforceable. I never agreed to this. Your signature indicates otherwise, Thomas replied. As does the annual renewal, which you've signed 3 times now. You tricked me, Nathan accused, looking at me with genuine shock, as if he were the betrayed party. You knew I never read those investment papers. A failure of due diligence. On your part, I observed calmly, hardly constitutes fraud. Miranda placed a restraining hand on Nathan's arm as he started to rise. Let's remain professional. She turned to Thomas. This document requires careful review. We'll need time to consult with additional counsel. Of course, Thomas agreed pleasantly. Though you should know the pregnancy clause includes a time-sensitive element. Assets transferred after service of divorce papers may be subject to recovery action. Nathan paled further. The $100,000 he'd moved to his private account yesterday, a transfer Sullivan Investigations had documented immediately, would now be problematic. This is ridiculous, he snapped. I'm not going to be blackmailed into staying in a failed marriage. No one's asking you to stay, I replied softly. The agreement simply ensures our child and I are properly provided for. Given the timing of your decision, Miranda was rapidly making notes. We need to calculate exactly what this means financially. Nathan, what assets did you bring into the marriage independently? Nathan ran a hand through his carefully styled hair, visibly rattled. My condo downtown, my investment portfolio, maybe $2 million then, savings of about $300,000. Thomas slid another document across the table. For convenience, we've prepared a summary of premarital versus marital assets. As you'll see, the current marital estate is valued at approximately $28 million, of which roughly $23 million would revert to a lease under the agreement. The silence that followed was absolute. Nathan stared at the figures. Disbelief etched on his face. This is absurd, Miranda finally declared. Nathan earned the majority of this money through his position at Reynolds Financial. Actually, I interjected, the growth came primarily through investment vehicles I established through Harrington subsidiaries. Nathan's salary, while substantial, accounts for less than 20% of our asset accumulation. You never told me you were investing through your father's company, Nathan accused. You never asked, I replied simply. The quarterly reports detailed every investment clearly. Again, your failure to review them isn't my responsibility. Miranda's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then did a double-take, her composed facade cracking momentarily. Problem? Thomas inquired politely. She recovered quickly. Nothing relevant to our discussion. But the slight tremor in her hand suggested otherwise. My own phone vibrated in my pocket. A quick glance confirmed what I already knew. The Harrington Holdings press release had just gone live, announcing my appointment as Vice President of Strategic Development. Judging by Miranda's reaction, she'd just received the same news. Nathan, oblivious to this development, was still fixated on the financial summary. This can't be right. The penthouse is in both our names. The holding company that purchased... The penthouse is in both your names, Thomas corrected. The company itself is owned 90% by Elise's family trust. Your contribution was the down payment, which you'll notice is credited to you here. He tapped a line item on the summary. Nathan looked at me, truly seeing me perhaps for the first time in our marriage. You planned this all along. I protected myself, I corrected him. There's a difference. Regardless, Miranda interjected, gathering her composure. We'll need to thoroughly review these documents before proceeding. I suggest we adjourn and reconvene next week. Thomas closed his portfolio. Certainly, though be advised we've already filed a notice with the court regarding the post-nuptial agreement. Any assets moved after today will trigger automatic review. Nathan's expression confirmed he'd been planning exactly that. As we prepared to leave, Miranda's assistant appeared at the door. Ms. Chen, I have Mr. Wallace from the Chronicle on line 2. He's asking about the Harrington Holdings announcement and its impact on the Morrison divorce. Miranda's eyes snapped to me. What announcement? I rose carefully from my chair, one hand supporting my lower back. My appointment as Vice President of Strategic Development at Harrington Holdings, effective immediately. You're returning to work? Now? Nathan's disbelief was almost comical. You're 6 months pregnant. Pregnancy doesn't diminish my professional capabilities, I replied calmly, though I appreciate your sudden concern for my condition. Miranda's expression had turned calculating. The timing is interesting. Merely coincidental, Thomas interjected smoothly. The board vote was scheduled weeks ago. A patent lie, but impossible to disprove. If there's nothing else? I asked, gathering my purse. Nathan stood abruptly. This isn't over, Elise. On the contrary, I replied, meeting his gaze steadily. It's proceeding exactly as outlined in the agreement you signed. Thomas will coordinate with Miranda on next steps. As Thomas and I walked toward the elevator, I felt Nathan's stare burning into my back. The first round had gone decisively in my favor, but I harbored no illusions that he would concede easily. Men like Nathan, accustomed to controlling the narrative, rarely surrendered without a fight. Once in the privacy of the elevator, Thomas allowed himself a small smile. That went rather well, he observed. Though Miranda Chen is formidable, she'll seek every possible angle to challenge the agreement. Let her, I replied, feeling my daughter shift restlessly inside me. We anticipated every argument when we drafted it. Nevertheless, prepare for aggressive tactics. They'll likely request an emergency hearing to freeze assets pending review of the postnup. I nodded, already anticipating our counter-moves. Dad's publicity team is standing by if they attempt character assassination, and Sullivan's report on Nathan's extracurricular activities with Miranda should provide useful leverage. The elevator reached the lobby, its doors opening to reveal a small cluster of reporters already gathered near the entrance. News traveled, fast in financial circles. Ms. Harrington, called one, surging forward. Can you comment on your appointment at Harrington Holdings during your divorce proceedings? Is it true your husband's affair with his divorce attorney began before your pregnancy? Thomas stepped slightly in front of me, his expression stern. Ms. Harrington has no comment at this time. Any questions should be directed to Harrington Holdings Media Relations Office. He guided me efficiently through the crowd to the waiting car, where Martin, my father's longtime driver, held the door open. Your father sends his congratulations, Martin said as he closed the door behind us. Both on the appointment and, quote, showing that weasel what a Harrington is made of. I smiled despite myself. Thank you, Martin. Home, please. As the car pulled away from the curb, I watched the reporters turn their attention to the building entrance, where Nathan and Miranda had just emerged. Their expressions, Nathan's thunderous, Miranda's carefully blank, told me everything I needed to know about their post-meeting discussion. Round 2 begins tomorrow, Thomas observed, following my gaze. They'll file for an emergency review first thing in the morning. And we'll be ready, I assured him, turning away from the window. Has Sarah prepared the forensic accounting report? Delivered this morning. Nathan's financial maneuvers over the past month are extensively documented. The transfers to his private account, the liquidated stock options, even the safety deposit box he opened last week. The safety deposit box was new information. Contents? Unknown, but the timing is suspicious. Established the day after he consulted Miranda for the first time. I made a mental note to have Sullivan investigate further. Nathan wasn't particularly creative, but desperation might make him unpredictable. What's our next vulnerability? I asked, mentally reviewing our strategy. Thomas considered for a moment. Your pregnancy itself. They may suggest the stress of litigation poses a risk to your health. Attempt to delay proceedings until after delivery when the special provisions would no longer apply. Dr. Winters has already confirmed my excellent health, I replied. And I've been documenting my vital signs and stress levels daily since Nathan first mentioned divorce. If necessary, we can demonstrate that uncertainty would cause more stress than resolution. Thomas nodded approvingly. You've thought of everything. Not everything, I reflected silently. I hadn't anticipated how it would feel to watch the man I had loved, the father of my child, look at me with such naked calculation. Despite everything, some foolish part of me had hoped Nathan might show a flicker of regret, perhaps even guilt. Instead, I'd seen only thwarted entitlement and anger. "The penthouse will need additional security tonight," Thomas said, interrupting my thoughts. "Nathan may attempt to remove items of value." "Already arranged," I assured him. "The building management has been instructed not to allow removal of art or antiques without dual authorization." As we approached the penthouse, I saw a familiar figure pacing outside, my younger sister Caroline, clutching 2 takeout bags from my favorite Italian restaurant. "Reinforcements," I murmured, as Martin pulled to the curb. Caroline rushed forward as I emerged from the car. At 32, 2 years my junior, she had inherited our mother's dramatic flair along with her auburn hair. "Tell me everything," she demanded, linking her arm through mine as we entered the building. Dad's being maddeningly vague, just saying, "You handled it beautifully." What happened? Did he cry? Did that shark lawyer turn green when Thomas showed up? "Let's get inside first," I suggested, nodding to Thomas as he departed with promises to call with any developments. I need to change out of these heels before my ankles stage a complete rebellion. Upstairs, I quickly changed into loose loungewear while Caroline arranged our dinner on the living room coffee table. Contraband carbonara for her, grilled chicken and vegetables for me. "Now," she said, settling cross-legged on the floor across. "From me, spill every detail." I recounted the meeting as we ate, describing Miranda's composure, Nathan's shock, and the precise moment the balance of power had shifted. "God, what I wouldn't give to have seen his face," Caroline said, twirling pasta on her fork. The great Nathan Morrison, master of the universe, realizing his pregnant wife outmaneuvered him. "It's not a victory yet," I cautioned her. "Just the opening move." Caroline snorted inelegantly. "Please, Nathan never stood a chance against you, even before you went full Harrington on him." Her expression softened. "But are you okay? Really?" The simple question nearly undid me. Since Nathan's announcement, I'd operated in strategic mode, planning, executing, advancing. I hadn't allowed myself to fully process the emotional reality of my marriage's collapse. "I'm angry," I admitted quietly. Not just about the affair or the divorce, but that he thought so little of me. 4 years together, and he never bothered to really see me. Just the convenient version he constructed in his mind. Caroline reached across to squeeze my hand. His loss. Monumentally, catastrophically his loss. "I know," I agreed, feeling my daughter shift inside me. "And honestly, I'm relieved in a way. Better to raise her without the pretense of a partnership that never really existed." My phone buzzed with an incoming email. Caroline peered over my shoulder as I opened it. "Holy shit," she breathed. "Is that—" "Nathan's girlfriend list," I confirmed, scanning Sullivan's latest report. "Dating back 18 months. Miranda's. Just the most recent," Caroline let out a low whistle. "Multiple affairs, then. Does that change anything legally?" "No. New York is no fault, but it confirms what I suspected. His dissatisfaction wasn't sudden." The report contained meticulously documented evidence, hotel receipts, restaurant charges, photograph timestamps. Nathan had been unfaithful almost from the beginning, it seemed, his interest waning mere months after our wedding. A sudden wave of exhaustion washed over me. The day's victories, while satisfying, had extracted their toll. Caroline, ever perceptive, began gathering our dinner remnants. "You need rest. Big sister or not, you're growing an entire human in there." "Stay tonight?" I asked, surprising myself with the request. I'd prided myself on handling this situation independently, but suddenly the thought of being alone in the penthouse felt overwhelming. "Already planned on it," Caroline replied, holding up an overnight bag I hadn't noticed by the door. "Dad's orders, though I would have anyway." As she helped me up from the couch, my phone buzzed again, a text from Nathan. "We need to talk. Privately. No lawyers." Caroline read the message over my shoulder and scoffed. Translation: I need to try manipulating you without witnesses present. Exactly my thought, I agreed, setting the phone aside without replying. Whatever Nathan wanted to discuss could wait until morning. Tonight was for rest and regrouping. Tomorrow would bring the next phase of battle, and I needed all my strength for what lay ahead. Because if today's meeting had confirmed anything, it was that Nathan, faced with the prospect of losing both status and money, would stop at nothing to regain control. But then, neither would I. Morning arrived with the insistent buzz of my phone. 3 missed calls from Nathan, 5 text messages, and an email from Thomas Pierce marked urgent. I scrolled through Nathan's texts first. We need to talk before this gets out of hand. Elise, be reasonable. Let's discuss this like adults. You're making a mistake. I know things about your father's business you don't. Call me. Last chance to handle this privately. Fine. Have it your way. The progression from cajoling to threatening was predictably Nathan. I forwarded the messages to Thomas, then opened his email. As expected, Nathan and Miranda had filed an emergency motion challenging the post-nuptial agreement, claiming fraud and coercion. A hearing was scheduled for 2 p.m. Coercion, I murmured to myself, one hand resting on my active baby bump. That's rich. What's rich? Caroline asked sleepily from the doorway of the guest room, her auburn hair tousled from sleep. Nathan's legal strategy. I showed her the email. Apparently, his pregnant wife tricked and coerced him into signing a legal document he couldn't be bothered to read. Caroline snorted, padding toward the kitchen. Bold strategy. How's the judge going to feel about a so-called financial expert claiming he signed documents without reading them? Exactly, I agreed, following her. Coffee's in the left cabinet, decaf for me. Disgusting, she commented, but dutifully prepared. 2 cups. What's the plan for today? Emergency hearing at 2. Before that, I have a meeting at Harrington Holdings to finalize my transition. The Richardson portfolio needs attention. Caroline handed me a steaming mug of decaf. You're seriously going to work today? Hours before facing your soon-to-be ex in court? Business continues, I replied simply. Besides, staying busy keeps me focused. My phone rang. This time my father? Morning, Dad. Sullivan sent over his final report, he said without preamble. You'll want to see this immediately. I've forwarded it to your secure email. That's serious? Let's just say Nathan's been using company resources at Reynolds Financial for more than client meetings. I've already alerted Thomas. After ending the call, I opened the secure email application on my tablet. The attached report from Sullivan contained financial records from Reynolds Financial, showing Nathan had been charging personal expenses, including hotels and gifts for his various paramours, to client accounts, then obscuring the entries through creative accounting, not just adultery, but fraud. This changes things, I told Caroline, who was reading over my shoulder with widening eyes. Holy hell, she breathed. He's been embezzling? Not technically, I clarified. He's the VP of Client Relations. He has discretion over entertainment expenses. But charging escort services to the Martinez account crosses several lines, both ethical and potentially legal. I forwarded the report to Thomas with instructions to prepare it for potential submission to the court, then headed to shower and dress. By 8:30, I was in the back of my father's town car, en route to Harrington Holdings, dressed in a charcoal maternity suit with subtle gold accessories, my battle armor for the day ahead. Martin navigated morning traffic with practiced ease. Your father asked me to remain at your disposal today, Ms. Harrington, wherever you need to go, whenever you need to leave. Thank you, Martin. I caught his concerned glance in the rearview mirror. I'll be fine. This isn't my first corporate battle. Of course not, he agreed. But it's the first involving your child's father. His simple observation cut through my carefully maintained composure. Martin had driven me to school every day for 12 years, attended my graduation, and cried openly at my wedding. He'd earned the right to such observations. Yes, I acknowledged softly. That does complicate things. Just remember, he said as we pulled up to the Harrington building. Family is more than blood or marriage. It's who stands beside you when battle lines are drawn. Looking up at the gleaming tower bearing my family name, I felt a surge of gratitude for the network of support surrounding me. Whatever happened in court today, I wasn't facing it alone. The executive floor buzzed with activity as I stepped off the elevator. Janet intercepted me immediately, tablet in hand. Board members are requesting updates on the Richardson portfolio before market open. Legal needs your signature on the Westridge acquisition papers. The PR team has prepared talking points for any questions about your personal situation, and your father is waiting in the conference room with Sarah. I accepted the tablet she handed me, scanning the morning's agenda. Tell the board I'll distribute Richardson updates within the hour. I'll sign the Westridge papers now, and I don't need PR talking points. Any personal questions will receive a simple, no comment. Janet nodded approvingly. Exactly what your father suggested. Also, Mr. Daniels from Reynolds Financial called 3 times this morning. That was unexpected. Reynolds Financial's CEO rarely involved himself in personnel matters. Did he say what it was regarding? No, but he sounded concerned. Said it was a sensitive matter requiring discretion. Interesting. I wondered if Sullivan's investigation had stirred something at Nathan's firm. I'll call him after my meeting with Dad, I decided. Anything else urgent? Just one thing. Janet's professional demeanor softened slightly. The executive team had this delivered for your office. She gestured to a doorway where 2 facilities staff were positioning an elegant bassinet beside a small seating area. A discreet sign on the wall read, "Quiet zone for mother and baby." They wanted you to know, your daughter is welcome here, Janet explained. The adjacent office has been converted for privacy when needed. The thoughtful gesture, so unlike the cold corporate environment Nathan had described at Reynolds, momentarily overwhelmed me. These people weren't just colleagues. They were extended family who had known me since childhood. Please convey my thanks to everyone involved, I managed, blinking back unexpected tears. Pregnancy hormones, I told myself, though I knew it was more than that. Janet squeezed my arm gently. We're all very glad to have you back, Elise. In the conference room, I found my father reviewing documents with Sarah Matthews, Harrington Holdings' chief legal counsel. At 68, with salt and pepper hair and razor-sharp intellect, Sarah had broken countless glass ceilings in corporate law before joining our family company. Perfect timing, Dad said, rising to kiss my cheek. Sarah's been analyzing Sullivan's findings. Morning, Elise, Sarah greeted me. How are you feeling? Ready, I replied, settling into a chair. What's our exposure if Nathan retaliates by revealing proprietary information about Harrington Investments? Sarah smiled thinly. Minimal. The confidentiality clauses in your post-nuptial are ironclad, with liquidated damages provisions. If Nathan discloses anything, he'll trigger automatic penalties that would essentially wipe out whatever remains of his financial position. And Reynolds Financial? I asked. Nathan implied he has damaging information. A bluff, my father interjected, confidently. We maintain ethical firewalls between Harrington and any institution where family members work. Nathan never had access to anything substantive. Sarah nodded agreement. His threats are empty. More concerning is what Sullivan discovered about his activities at Reynolds. If that information becomes public, Reynolds could face regulatory scrutiny, which explains why Daniels has been calling, I mused. Someone at Reynolds must have gotten wind of the investigation. Tread carefully there, Sarah advised. Nathan is still technically employed by Reynolds. Anything you discuss with Daniels could complicate matters. Understood. I checked my watch. I should call him before the court hearing. Is there anything else I need to know? Sarah slid a folder across the table. Thomas filed our response to their emergency motion. Judge Watkins is presiding. She's fair but unsympathetic to claims of financial carelessness from sophisticated parties. Perfect, I said, scanning the response brief. Thomas had systematically dismantled each of Nathan's claims, emphasizing his professional background in finance and the multiple times he'd signed the renewal agreement. One more thing, my father added, his expression grave. Sullivan noted unusual activity on Nathan's computer last night. He accessed sensitive client files at Reynolds, downloaded multiple documents, then deleted the access logs. That was concerning. You think he's planning to use client information as leverage? Or simply securing his future employment options, Sarah suggested. Either way, it's problematic for him professionally. I made a note to alert Thomas. What about the Richardson portfolio presentation for the board? Already prepared, Dad said, pushing another folder toward me. Just needs your final review before distribution. For the next hour, we worked through the Richardson materials, finalizing performance metrics and growth projections. The portfolio, my pet project for the past year, had consistently outperformed market expectations, providing tangible proof of my financial acumen, independent of Nathan or my family name. At 11, I excused myself to call Reynolds Financial's CEO from the privacy of my office. Edward Daniels, answered a clipped voice after the first ring. Mr. Daniels, Elise Harrington returning your call. Elise. His tone softened. Thank you for getting back to me. I understand this is a difficult time. What can I do for you, Mr. Daniels? He cleared his throat uncomfortably. This is a delicate matter. We've become aware of some irregularities in Nathan's client accounting. Given your situation, I wanted to speak with you directly before our audit committee proceeds. So they had discovered Nathan's creative bookkeeping independently of Sullivan's investigation. Interesting. I appreciate your courtesy, I said carefully. But I'm not involved in Reynolds Financial's operations, nor am I privy to Nathan's professional activities. Of course, Daniels agreed quickly. I only called because, well, to be frank, Nathan has implied that any issues with his accounts were at your direction. Something about joint management of client relationships. Anger flared hot and immediate. Of course, Nathan would try to implicate me in his misdeeds. Mr. Daniels, I said, keeping my voice level, I have never had any involvement with Reynolds. Financials client accounts. I have never directed Nathan or anyone else regarding client expenses or accounting. Any suggestion otherwise is categorically false. I suspected as much, he sighed. Nathan's been making increasingly concerning claims this morning. He seems unstable. Is he at the office now? No. He called in from home. Your home, I suppose. He's been placed on administrative leave pending our investigation. Administrative leave. Nathan's career at Reynolds was effectively over, whether he realized it yet or not. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, meaning it despite everything. Nathan's identity was inexorably tied to his professional status. Losing it would devastate him. There's one more thing, Daniels added hesitantly. Nathan mentioned he has evidence of improper coordination between Reynolds and Harrington Holdings, some kind of insider trading allegation. So that was his angle, desperate and predictable. There is no such evidence because no such coordination exists, I stated firmly. Harrington Holdings maintains strict ethical firewalls regarding family, members employed at financial institutions. All of our transactions are transparent and fully documented. I believe that was the case, Daniels said, sounding relieved. Nevertheless, I felt obligated to inform you of his claims. After ending the call, I immediately phoned Thomas to update him on this new development. He agreed to prepare for potential allegations during the hearing. This smacks of desperation, Thomas observed. He's searching for leverage, any leverage. Agreed. Have you been in contact with Miranda today? Briefly. She's exploring settlement options, which suggests their confidence is waning. I think they recognize the postnuptial will likely be upheld. No settlement, I said firmly. The agreement stands as written. By 1 o'clock, I had finalized the Richardson presentation, briefed the board, and was en route to the courthouse, with Thomas. Martin navigated through midday traffic while I reviewed our legal strategy one final time. Remember, Thomas advised as we approached the imposing courthouse steps, Judge Watkins appreciates calm, factual responses. No matter what, Nathan or Miranda allege, maintain your composure. Understood. I smoothed my blazer over my rounded belly, drawing strength from my daughter's reassuring movements within. The courtroom was mercifully private. Family court proceedings typically excluded spectators, but I still felt a wave of vulnerability as we entered. Nathan and Miranda were already seated at the respondents' table, heads bent together in urgent conversation. Nathan looked uncharacteristically disheveled, his usually immaculate appearance showing signs of strain. Thomas guided me to our table, arranging our materials with meticulous precision. I focused on my breathing, conscious of maintaining optimal blood pressure for my baby's sake. At precisely 2 o'clock, the bailiff called the court to order, and Judge Watkins entered, a formidable African-American woman in her 60s with shrewd eyes and an air of no-nonsense efficiency. Morrison vs. Harrington Morrison, she announced, scanning the preliminary filings. Emergency motion challenging the validity of a post-nuptial agreement. Ms. Chen, as you filed the motion, please proceed. Miranda rose smoothly. Thank you, Your Honor. We're seeking immediate relief from a grossly inequitable post-nuptial agreement. That was deceptively obtained and contains punitive provisions triggered by my client's divorce filing. Deceptively obtained how? Judge Watkins asked, peering over her reading glasses. The agreement was concealed within routine investment documents, Your Honor. Mr. Morrison had no knowledge he was signing a post-nuptial agreement affecting his marital rights. Judge Watkins' expression remained neutral. Was the document clearly titled? Technically, yes, Your Honor, but was Mr. Morrison prevented from reading the document? No, but was he denied legal counsel? He wasn't informed that legal counsel would be appropriate, Miranda countered. Judge Watkins turned her attention to our table. Mr. Pierce, your response? Thomas rose with dignified confidence. Your Honor, the post-nuptial agreement in question was properly executed, clearly labeled, and annually renewed. Mr. Morrison, a financial professional with an MBA from Wharton, signed the agreement 3 separate times. His claim of ignorance strains credibility, particularly given his professional background in reviewing financial documents. The judge nodded thoughtfully. Mr. Morrison, I have some questions for you directly. Nathan stood, straightening his tie nervously. Yes, Your Honor. You work in financial services, correct? Yes, Your Honor. I'm Vice President of Client Relations at Reynolds Financial. And in that capacity, do you regularly review and sign legal and financial documents? I do, Your Honor. Do you typically sign such documents without reading them? Nathan shifted uncomfortably. Not typically, no. But in personal matters with my wife, there was a level of trust that... Please answer the question directly, Mr. Morrison. Do you make a practice of signing legal documents without reading them? No, Your Honor. Yet you claim to have signed this particular document 3 separate times without knowing its contents? Nathan glanced at Miranda, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. Your Honor, my wife deliberately presented these documents at times when thorough review was difficult. Late evenings after long workdays, or just before social engagements when time was limited. I stiffened at the blatant lie. Thomas placed a cautioning hand on my arm, reminding me to maintain composure. Judge Watkins turned to me. Ms. Harrington Morrison, did you intentionally prevent your husband from reviewing these documents? I rose, carefully, conscious of my visible pregnancy. Absolutely not, Your Honor. Each signing was scheduled in advance, with ample time allocated. The investment review meetings typically lasted 1 to 2 hours, with all documents available for examination. The judge made a note, then addressed Nathan again. Mr. Morrison, your motion also claims coercion. Please elaborate. Nathan straightened, seemingly gaining confidence. Your Honor, my wife comes from a powerful family with significant influence in financial circles. There was an implied threat that opposing her wishes would result in professional consequences for me. Judge Watkins raised a skeptical eyebrow. Was this implied threat documented anywhere? Not in writing, no, but the pressure was clear. Ms. Harrington Morrison, your response? Your Honor, no such pressure was ever applied. My husband's professional success has been entirely his own achievement. Until yesterday, I had been absent from Harrington Holdings operations for 4 years, focusing instead on supporting my husband's career. The judge studied me thoughtfully. Which brings us to timing. Mr. Morrison, you filed for divorce while your wife is 6 months pregnant with your child. The postnuptial agreement contains specific provisions addressing this exact scenario. Do you dispute that the timing of your filing triggered these provisions? No, Your Honor, Nathan admitted, but I wasn't aware such provisions existed when I filed. Because you didn't read the agreement, Judge Watkins concluded flatly. Exactly, Your Honor, Miranda interjected, which speaks to our fundamental argument. Mr. Morrison cannot be bound by terms he was unaware of due to his wife's deliberate concealment. It wasn't concealed, Your Honor, Thomas countered. It was presented openly with his other investment documents. Mr. Morrison chose not to read it. That's negligence, not fraud. Judge Watkins reviewed the agreement once more, then looked up decisively. I'm ready to rule on this motion. Mr. Morrison, your claim that you were unaware of the postnuptial agreement's contents does not constitute grounds for invalidation. As a sophisticated professional with extensive experience in financial matters, your failure to read a clearly labeled legal document before signing it represents negligence on your part, not fraud or coercion by your wife. Nathan's face flushed with anger as the judge continued. The agreement appears properly executed, with appropriate consideration and disclosure. The triggering provision regarding pregnancy may be unusual, but it is neither unconscionable nor contrary to public policy. Therefore, I am denying your motion to invalidate the postnuptial agreement. It will remain in force during these proceedings. Miranda immediately rose. Your Honor, given this ruling, we request a stay to allow Mr. Morrison time to evaluate his options regarding the divorce filing itself. Judge Watkins shook her head. The filing has already triggered the agreement's provisions. A stay would be procedurally meaningless at this point. She gathered her papers. I'm scheduling a case management conference for next Monday to establish discovery timelines. We're adjourned. The gavel's sharp crack echoed through the courtroom as Nathan stared at me with undisguised hostility. Thomas quickly gathered our materials as the judge departed. A complete victory, he murmured. Congratulations. But it didn't feel like victory. Despite everything, watching Nathan's professional and personal life unravel brought me no joy. He was still my child's father, still the man I had once loved enough to marry. As we prepared to leave, Nathan approached, ignoring Thomas's cautioning presence. You won't get away with this, he hissed, low enough that only I could hear. I know things about your father's business, things that would interest federal regulators. Nathan, I replied calmly, we both know you have nothing. Don't compound. Your problems with empty threats and potential slander? This isn't over, he insisted, as Miranda attempted to pull him away. You think you've won? You have no idea what I'm capable of. Actually, I do, I said softly. That's why I had the foresight to protect myself and our daughter from exactly this scenario. Thomas stepped between us. This conversation is over, Mr. Morrison. Any further communication should go through counsel. As Nathan was led away by an increasingly frustrated Miranda, I felt a peculiar emptiness. The man I had married, or thought I had married, was entirely gone, replaced by this angry stranger hurling threats and accusations. Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered despite our attempts at discretion. Thomas skillfully guided me through them to the waiting car, deflecting questions with practiced ease. Once safely inside, I released a long, shaky breath. That went about as expected. Better than expected, Thomas corrected. Judge Watkins rarely rules from the bench on complex financial matters. The fact that she did speaks to the strength of our position. My phone buzzed with a text from Caroline. Verdict? Prenup upheld. Nathan not taking it well. I replied simply, no surprise there. Dad's ordering champagne, sparkling cider for you. Dinner at his place tonight to celebrate. I put the phone away, leaning back against the comfortable leather seat. Take me back to Harrington Holdings, please, Martin. I still have work to finish. Are you sure? Thomas asked, concern evident in his voice. It's been an eventful day. I'm sure, I confirmed. The Richardson portfolio won't manage itself, and focusing on work keeps me from dwelling on... I gestured vaguely toward the courthouse behind us. Thomas nodded, understanding. Very well. I'll update your father on today's proceedings and prepare for Monday's conference. As Martin navigated away from the courthouse, I glanced back to see Nathan emerging, surrounded by reporters. Even from a distance, his body language broadcast rage and humiliation. Martin, I said suddenly, could you drive by the penthouse? I need to check something. Of course, Ms. Harrington. Thomas gave me a questioning look, but I merely shook my head slightly. A suspicion had formed. Nathan's uncharacteristic dishevelment, his desperate accusations, Edward Daniels' concerns about unstable behavior, something wasn't adding up. As we approached our building, I noted unusual activity at the entrance. Building security engaged in what appeared to be a heated discussion with someone just inside the lobby. Stop here, please, I instructed Martin. Elise, Thomas cautioned. Whatever's happening, it's better to stay uninvolved. I just need to see, I insisted, lowering the window slightly. From this distance, I could now make out the scene clearly. Nathan, having somehow beaten us here, was arguing with building security while attempting to remove several large boxes from the premises. My suspicion confirmed, I raised the window. Take me to Harrington Holdings now, please, Martin. What is it? Thomas asked, noting my changed demeanor. Nathan's removing items from the penthouse against building policy, I explained. Let security handle it. I've already flagged our valuables with management. As we pulled away, I sent a quick text to the building manager confirming Nathan should not be permitted to remove anything beyond personal clothing and toiletries. Whatever game he was playing, whether attempting to secure valuables before asset freezing or simply acting out of spite, it would fail. The Richardson portfolio awaited my attention, and my daughter deserved a mother focused on the future, not dwelling on a marriage that had revealed itself to be built on illusion. Nathan's final threat echoed in my mind as Martin accelerated smoothly toward Harrington Holdings. You have no idea what I'm capable of. Perhaps not, but whatever came, next I would be ready. The next 3 days passed in relative calm, perhaps too calm, given Nathan's volatile parting words. I divided my time between Harrington Holdings, where the Richardson portfolio demanded careful management during market fluctuations, and preparations for Monday's case management conference. On Friday evening, Caroline accompanied me to the penthouse to collect additional clothing and personal items. Building security reported that Nathan had not returned since his failed attempt to remove property, though his access had not been revoked. You're sure you don't want to stay at Dad's? Caroline asked as we sorted through my closet. Or my place. This penthouse feels, I don't know, tainted somehow. It's still my home, I replied, selecting maternity wear appropriate for next week's meetings. I won't be driven out, especially not before the court formally addresses residence rights. Caroline sighed, folding a cashmere sweater with uncharacteristic precision. You're stubborn, you know that? Dad says it's the Harrington in you. Says the man who once refused to sell a property despite 3 foundation cracks and a termite infestation, I countered with a smile. Exactly. Pig-headed determination runs in our blood. She paused, expression turning serious. But seriously, Elise, Nathan's behaving erratically. Edward Daniels called Dad again today. Apparently, Nathan tried to access Reynolds's secure servers remotely after his credentials were suspended. That was concerning. Did he succeed? No, but the attempt itself triggered security protocols. Daniels is considering legal action. I absorbed this information, mentally adding it to the growing catalog of Nathan's increasingly desperate maneuvers. First the divorce during pregnancy, then the affair with Miranda, followed by attempts to remove assets, and now potential corporate espionage. The pattern suggested escalating recklessness. I'll update Thomas, I decided, sending a quick text to our attorney. But I'm still staying here tonight. The building has 24-hour security, and I've changed all the locks. Caroline looked unconvinced, but didn't argue further. After helping me pack essentials, she reluctantly departed with promises to check in hourly. Her concern was touching, if somewhat suffocating. Alone in the penthouse, I moved through the familiar rooms that now felt subtly different. Spaces once shared that would soon be divided. Memories stored in furniture and artwork soon to be liquidated. Or separated. In the nursery, I traced my fingers over the half-finished mural Nathan had started painting before his interest in impending fatherhood had mysteriously waned. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number. Normally I'd let such calls go to voicemail, but something, intuition perhaps, prompted me to answer. Elise Harrington, I said cautiously. Ms. Harrington, this is Detective Ramirez, NYPD Financial Crimes. The woman's voice was professional, direct. Do you have a moment to answer some questions about your husband, Nathan Morrison? My pulse quickened. May I ask what this is regarding? We're investigating potentially unauthorized access to secure financial systems at Reynolds Financial. Mr. Morrison's supervisor has reported suspicious activity. So Daniels had escalated the matter to law enforcement already. Interesting. I'm happy to assist, Detective, but I should note that I'm currently in divorce proceedings with my husband and have limited knowledge of his professional activities. Understood, Detective Ramirez replied. Nevertheless, your perspective could be valuable. Would tomorrow morning work for a brief interview at your convenience? We arranged to meet at Harrington Holdings at 10 the following morning. After ending the call, I immediately contacted Thomas to inform him of this new development. Police involvement changes things, he observed. If Nathan is under criminal investigation, it could actually simplify our divorce proceedings. Courts take a dim view of parties engaged in financial misconduct. That's assuming he's actually guilty of something, I pointed out. So far, it's just suspicious behavior. True, but either way, it adds pressure on him to settle according to the postnuptial terms rather than prolonging litigation while under scrutiny. After we disconnected, I found myself standing before the large windows overlooking the city, one hand resting on my active baby bump. My daughter had been particularly energetic today, as if sensing the storm surrounding her impending arrival. Don't worry, I whispered to her. Whatever happens, I'll make sure you're safe and secure. The peacefulness of the moment was shattered by the harsh buzz of the penthouse's intercom. The building concierge's voice came through clearly. Ms. Harrington Morrison, I apologize for the interruption, but Mr. Morrison is in the lobby insisting on access to the penthouse. He appears agitated. Would you like me to have security escort him out? I considered my options quickly. Denying Nathan access could escalate his already volatile state, while allowing him entry posed its own risks. However, with building security aware of the situation and my family on high alert, a controlled confrontation might be preferable to prolonging the inevitable. You can send him up, Anthony, I decided. but please have security remain on standby. Of course, Ms. Harrington Morrison, they'll be right outside if needed. I moved to the kitchen, positioning myself with the marble island between me and the entry. Within minutes, I heard the elevator doors open, followed by Nathan's uneven footsteps in the foyer. He appeared in the doorway looking considerably worse than he had in court. Unshaven, shirt wrinkled, eyes bloodshot. The controlled, polished financial executive had been replaced by someone I barely recognized. Nathan, I acknowledged calmly. Anthony mentioned you were agitated. Agitated? He gave a harsh laugh, moving into the kitchen but stopping when he noticed my protective positioning behind the island. That's one word for it. Betrayed might be another. Destroyed works too. What do you want, Nathan? Thomas was clear that all communication should go through counsel. Thomas Pierce, he spat the name like a curse. Your father's attack dog. Tell me, Elise, was this the plan all along? Marry me, let me build a life with you, then destroy me. When I'm no longer useful? You decided to divorce your pregnant wife, I reminded him gently. Everything that's happened since has been the natural consequence of that choice. He paced the kitchen perimeter, running a hand through his disheveled hair. Daniel suspended me, did you know that? Pending investigation into financial irregularities. Your father's doing, I assume. My father has no influence over Reynolds Financial's internal procedures, I corrected him. If you're being investigated, it's because your actions warranted scrutiny. Nathan's expression darkened. Always so calm, so reasonable. That's your act, isn't it? Quiet little Elise, supportive wife who never complained, never questioned, while secretly plotting and manipulating behind the scenes. There was no plot, Nathan. Only protection against exactly the scenario you created. I maintained my position. Behind the island, one hand resting protectively on my belly. Now, what is it you want? I assume you didn't come here just to accuse me of conspiracies. He stopped pacing abruptly. I want what's mine. Half the assets, as agreed when we married. Not this financial execution your post-nuptial dictates. The Batsy agreement you signed is legally binding, I reminded him. Judge Watkins was quite clear on that point. Because I didn't read the fine print, he exploded, slamming his hand on the counter. One mistake, one oversight, and you're using it to take everything. Not everything, I corrected him quietly. Only what's rightfully mine and our daughter's. You'll retain exactly what you brought into the marriage, adjusted for reasonable growth. Reasonable? He laughed bitterly. 2 million becomes what, maybe 3? While you walk away with over 20? 23.6, I clarified. And yes, that's the agreement you signed, 3 times. Nathan moved toward one of the kitchen drawers, and I tensed, suddenly alert to potential danger. But he merely withdrew a small stack of paper, tossing it onto the island between us. Here's my counteroffer, he stated flatly. Tear up the postnup, standard 50-50 division, joint custody, and I don't release this information to the SEC and financial press. I glanced at the documents without touching them. Printouts of various Harrington Holdings transactions, including several related to the Richardson portfolio. These are confidential corporate documents, I observed, my voice hardening. Removing them from Reynolds Financial constitutes corporate espionage at minimum, possibly theft of trade secrets. Call it what you want. He shrugged with false nonchalance. But these show clear patterns of insider trading between Harrington's subsidiaries and Reynolds' clients. Coincidental investment timing too precise to be accidental. I studied the papers more carefully now, immediately recognizing what he was attempting to present as evidence. These are standard market transactions, Nathan. Nothing illegal or improper about them. A good prosecutor could make them look suspicious, he countered. Enough to trigger an investigation, tank Harrington stock, and create very public problems for your father's company. Your company now too, I suppose. So this was his play. Desperate blackmail backed by manufactured evidence. I considered my options, knowing that engaging with his threat legitimized it, while dismissing it outright might provoke him further. You should know, I said carefully, that Detective Ramirez from NYPD Financial Crimes called me earlier. They're investigating unauthorized access to Reynolds' systems. Given the timing and those documents in front of you, I imagine you'll be hearing from her soon as well. The blood drained from Nathan's face. You're bluffing. We're meeting tomorrow morning at 10, I replied calmly. Feel free to verify with the department. Nathan's confident demeanor crumbled visibly. Elise, listen to me. I'm not the villain here. I made mistakes, yes, but this divorce, it wasn't about hurting you. It was about being honest before our daughter arrives. Wouldn't you rather she grow up with separated parents who respect each other than together in a loveless marriage? The sudden pivot to reasonable concern might have been convincing had I not witnessed his escalating desperation over the past week. Nathan, I said softly, if you truly cared about our daughter's well-being, you wouldn't be attempting to blackmail her mother with fabricated evidence while under criminal investigation. You'd be focused on building a stable co-parenting relationship and securing your own future. His expression hardened again. So that's it? No negotiation? No compromise? The post-nuptial agreement already represents the compromise, I explained. You retain your premarital assets plus reasonable growth, child support will be fair, and custody arrangements will prioritize our daughter's needs. That's the best outcome available now. Nathan stared at me for a long moment, something unreadable shifting in his eyes. Then, without warning, he swept the documents off the counter in a sudden burst of rage. This isn't over, he hissed, the same threat he'd made outside the courtroom. You think you've won, but I'll find a way. There's always a way. Nathan, I said firmly, threats won't change the legal reality. They'll only make things worse for you. He moved toward me suddenly, and I instinctively backed away, one hand protective over my belly. Seeing my reaction, he stopped, a flash of shame crossing his features. I wouldn't, he began, then stopped. I'm not that person, Elise. Whatever you think of me now. Then be better than this, I urged quietly. Accept the agreement, focus on building your future, and be the father our daughter deserves. For a moment, just a moment, I glimpsed the man I'd thought I'd married. Vulnerable, uncertain, capable of growth. Then his expression hardened once more. I'll see myself out, he said stiffly, gathering the scattered documents. Tell your detective friend I'll be available if she has questions. After he left, I released a shaky breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The confrontation had been intense but ultimately productive. Nathan now understood that his attempted blackmail had only worsened his position, and the involvement of law enforcement had clearly rattled him. I called building security to confirm. Nathan had left the premises, then texted Thomas a brief summary of the encounter. His response was immediate. Save any surveillance footage. Document everything. We'll discuss further steps tomorrow. Sleep proved elusive that night, my mind replaying the confrontation while my daughter maintained her seemingly nocturnal exercise routine. By morning, I had made a decision, one that balanced justice with practicality, and most importantly, served our daughter's long-term interests. Detective Ramirez arrived precisely at 10 the following morning, a compact woman with intelligent eyes and efficient movements. After reviewing what I knew of Nathan's activities at Reynolds Financial, little, and his recent behavior, concerning, she thanked me for my time. One more question, Ms. Harrington, she said as she gathered her notes. Given your husband's increasingly erratic behavior, have you considered a restraining order? The suggestion gave me pause. Is that something you'd recommend based on your professional experience? Detective Ramirez chose her words carefully. In financial crime cases, we often see escalation when the subject feels cornered. Mr. Morrison has lost his professional standing, faces divorce under unfavorable terms, and is now under criminal investigation. That's significant pressure on someone unaccustomed to failure. I'll discuss it with my attorney, I promised. Thank you for the suggestion. After she departed, I called an emergency meeting with Thomas, my father, and Sarah Matthews in the Harrington Holdings conference room. Together, we formulated a multifaceted approach to resolve the Nathan situation definitively. By Monday morning, our strategy was ready. When Nathan and Miranda arrived for the case management conference, Thomas immediately requested a private meeting in one of the courthouse consultation rooms. Before we proceed, Thomas began once we were all seated, my client would like to propose a modified settlement. Miranda's eyebrows rose in surprise, while Nathan looked instantly suspicious. What kind of modification? He asked warily. I leaned forward slightly, one that potentially benefits everyone at this table. For the next 20 minutes, I outlined our proposal. The postnuptial agreement would remain in force regarding asset division, but with 3 significant modifications. First, Nathan would receive a structured settlement providing additional liquidity, $2 million beyond his premarital assets, payable over 5 years, conditional on his full cooperation with Reynolds Financial's internal investigation and any law enforcement inquiries. Second, he would retain visitation rights with our daughter under supervised conditions for the first year, transitioning to standard arrangements thereafter, assuming appropriate behavior. Third, Harrington Holdings would provide a professional reference, limited to verifying his dates of employment and position at Reynolds, without mentioning the circumstances of his departure, once all legal matters were resolved. In exchange, Nathan would sign comprehensive confidentiality and non-disparagement, agreements covering both our marriage and any knowledge of Harrington business practices. Why would you offer this? Miranda asked suspiciously. You've won at every turn. The postnup is valid, Nathan's professional situation is precarious at best, and you hold all the leverage. Because, I replied simply, our daughter deserves a father with the opportunity to rebuild his life, not one destroyed by his own worst impulses. Nathan studied me intently, clearly searching for hidden motivations. And if I refuse? Then we proceed as originally outlined in the postnuptial agreement, Thomas answered. Additionally, Harrington Holdings will cooperate fully with any law enforcement investigations into potential corporate espionage or attempted blackmail. The threat was clear but professionally delivered. Nathan's attempt to use confidential documents as leverage had backfired spectacularly. Miranda requested time to confer privately with her client. When they returned 20 minutes later, Nathan's demeanor had changed subtly, less desperate, more resigned. We accept your terms, Miranda stated professionally, with the understanding that all current investigations will be resolved as part of this agreement. Harrington Holdings has no control over law enforcement actions, Thomas clarified, but we will convey to Reynolds Financial that we consider any civil matters between them and Mr. Morrison resolved by this agreement. Documents were drafted and signed over the next 2 hours, transforming what could have been months of bitter litigation into a structured resolution. When complete, Miranda departed to file the necessary paperwork, leaving Nathan and me momentarily alone in the consultation room. Why? He asked quietly. After everything, why offer me any lifeline at all? I rested both hands on my rounded belly, feeling our daughter's movements. Because rage and retribution are poor foundations for parenting, and because I meant what I said, she deserves a father capable of redemption. I didn't deserve you, he said after a moment, a rare glimpse of genuine self-awareness. I never did. Perhaps not, I acknowledged, but that's irrelevant now. What matters is what you do next, whether you become someone our daughter can respect. He nodded slowly. I'll try. That's all I can promise right now. It's enough to start with, I replied, gathering my belongings. As I moved toward the door, I paused. The nursery mural, the one you started painting before, everything. It was beautiful. She would have loved it. Something like grief flickered across his face. Maybe someday I can finish one for her. In whatever place becomes my home. Maybe, I agreed softly. Goodbye, Nathan. 3 months later, on a bright spring morning, Alexandra Caroline Harrington made her entrance into the world. 7 pounds, 9 ounces of determined personality with her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn chin. My father, Caroline, and Sarah Matthews crowded my hospital room with flowers, balloons, and appropriately tiny Harrington Holdings merchandise. She's perfect, Caroline declared, cradling her niece with unexpected expertise. A true Harrington. Woman already. With the Morrison determination, I added quietly, watching my daughter's tiny fist grasp Caroline's finger with surprising strength. Nathan had sent flowers and a small silver rattle, but respected the boundaries we'd established during those final negotiations. According to Miranda's monthly updates, he had relocated to Chicago, accepted a position with a smaller financial firm, and was attending therapy regularly. Small steps toward becoming the father Alexandra might someday know more fully. For now, our daughter would grow surrounded by the strength of her maternal family, while I continued building the Harrington legacy she would eventually inherit. The Richardson portfolio had already expanded under my direction, and the board had recently approved my proposal for a new division focused on sustainable development. As I watched my family dote on Alexandra, I reflected on the unexpected journey of the past 9 months. What had begun as betrayal had transformed into opportunity, revealing strengths I hadn't known I possessed, and clarifying priorities I might otherwise have neglected. "What are you thinking about?" my father asked, settling into the chair beside my hospital bed. "You've got that strategic look again." "The future," I replied, smiling as Caroline carefully returned Alexandra to my arms, "and all the possibilities it holds." Alexandra yawned widely, then settled against my chest with complete trust already secure in her place in the world. Whatever challenges awaited us, whatever complexities the future held regarding her father, I was certain of one thing. The protection I had put in place had secured not just our financial future, but the foundation for her to grow into her own strength. Some might view the postnuptial agreement as merely a legal maneuver, a strategic trap for an unsuspecting husband. But I knew better. It had been an act of love, not for Nathan, but for the child we would create together. Insurance against the storm that had eventually come, ensuring that when it passed, we would still be standing, faces turned toward the sun. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload. From us!